So what I want to look at today is how web applications are built out of a number of different components, including the web server and server-side databases. Now, you're very familiar with interacting with web applications through a browser, and we know that when you're requesting pages, HTML pages, they're transmitting over the internet and they're coming from another piece of software, which is the web server, which is interacting with the browser over the internet. You're sort of requesting pages, asking for pages, the web server finds the page and it sends it back. Well, a third component in this can be a database server, and we can have this situation where when we ask information of the web server, well, the web server actually pulls information out of the database server and actually sort of effectively answers a query, which is then wrapped up in HTML and then presented back to the browser. The database server doesn't actually have to be physically in the same place. There could be different machines. It could be an actual sort of server dedicated to just being a database server. One of the things, the sort of setups that's quite common, are these two pieces of software, Apache and MySQL. Now they're both open source software. That means they're free and available to use. But there are all sorts of restrictions on the license that maintains the freedom of these bits of software. They're very popular. Often in packages you see them in things that are called like MAMP and WAMP and things like that. So we're going to look at MySQL. And MySQL is a very popular open source database, and at some point in the past it was purchased by Oracle, but it's still available under an open source license. Now, if you're familiar with using Access, then your sort of conceptual model of a database might be something like it's one piece of software, and you sort of interact with it in a very sort of typical kind of PC software style. MySQL is a database server, so typically it runs on a machine in the background, and it has a series of programs that interact with the MySQL database server. So the database server is running in the background, and then you're interacting with it using these software components. Now, for those of you using your own machine, you may well have installed MAMP, and there are other packages available, WAMP and things. And MAMP, for example, is a piece of software that actually has Apache, PHP language support already built in, and the MySQL server. Well, we actually have two approaches that we can use here. We have a database server that's supplied through the university, and you can actually interact with it through the address kunet.kingston.ac.uk, or you can install MAMP locally, and you'll install MySQL as part of installing MAMP. So I'm just going to go through those two different approaches. So if you're if you don't want to install the software locally, then you're going to interact with the Kingston database server at that address. And the way that does that, you go to this address, and then if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that there's actually a part where it says right at the bottom, it says access the database management tool. And what that will do is that will create a database for you on the MySQL database server. So you sort of tap on that and you log in, and you're going to log in using your authentication details as per normal, and then it will enable you to actually create a database. Now what's important here is that you don't use your normal database password, so your normal password, for reasons that will become apparent later on. Just make up a different password, but it's really important that you keep note of these values. You want to keep note of the database name. Now that will be automatically suggested for you, so don't change that. I don't know if you actually can anyway, but make a note of the database name. Obviously you know your username, that's going to be K and then lots of digits, and make a note of the database password. Now you need to keep that, and you need to remember that password, and as I said, don't use your normal Kingston password for that password. And you click through, and what will happen is it will create the database for you. As I said, remember to keep a note of those values, And then you can click on the phpMyAdmin link. And phpMyAdmin is you'll have to log in. phpMyAdmin is a web interface that enables us to interact with the database server. So you'll be running the browser on your local machine and you'll be interacting with the database server, which is running in the background somewhere. If you're using the Kingston architecture, then that database is running in Penryn Road. If you are running it on your own machine, then obviously you're running the interface to the database server, which is running in the background. Now I'll come back to phpMyAdmin in a bit, but let's talk about if you're doing this on your own machine. Well, on your own machine, I've suggested that you install MAMP, and there's lots of different versions of MAMP available, but basically you click sort of start servers, and then you should see that MAMP uses this kind of traffic light system, and if you look closely you can see it says Apache server and MySQL server, and whatever the interface actually shows you, you should get a kind of little green dot, a little green Go symbol that indicates that the web server and the database server are running in the background. Now the thing to do next is to actually click on Open Web Start Page, and what that will do is that will take you to a page that looks something like this. And if you click on Tools and then just look down, you should see something that says phpMyAdmin, and you can click on that, phpMyAdmin, and that will get you into the phpMyAdmin interface, where we have a collection of tabs across the top. So it doesn't matter if you're using the Kingston University architecture or you're installing and using MAMP on your own machine. We're going to be interacting with it. We're going to be setting up and using the database using this phpMyAdmin interface. And we will be doing things like setting up the tables, interacting with queries, creating queries, entering data, all sorts of things through phpMyAdmin. And that's what we'll do in the next step.